Hi folks, it's Anna Sansom here, and today I'm going to be talking about demisexuality. And this is one of the topics that you asked me to talk about, so thank you so much for that invitation. I'm really excited to share. So first of all, just a little bit of a disclaimer, which is to say that I'm not an expert in this topic, but what I am is somebody who's very curious and fascinated by all different kinds of sexualities, and particularly how we express those aspects of ourselves. So how we find out who we are and what matters to us and what turns us on or doesn't turn us on, and then how we live our lives in full expression of that on our own terms, in our own way. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And the question that I had, or rather the opportunity that was given to me, was to talk about demisexuality. And the person who wrote to me said, how can I, let me just double check, like, I feel like I'm some kind of a prude because I want to get to know somebody emotionally before I jump in the sack with them. And that kind of sums up what demisexuality is about. So demisexuality or demisexuals are basically people who need to form an emotional attachment or an emotional bond, a deeper sense of knowing the other person before they can begin to feel sexual attraction. And then even if they do feel sexual attraction, they may or may not want to go on to develop that into sexual activity. So I kind of feel that, you know, we're presented with very limited and very bland representations of how to be sexual beings in this world. And one of the common tropes is around lust at first sight. So you see someone and you immediately fancy the pants off them. And that might be like, I don't know, like a movie star or a pop singer or somebody that you meet in a bar or something like that. And there's this notion that we look at people and we use our other senses as well, but you know, our first experience of somebody can be a sexual attraction experience, and that's a really kind of common theme that's presented. It's presented in movies, it's presented in songs, it's definitely presented in erotic writing, and I'm guilty of that one myself. You know, a lot of erotica features two strangers who meet for the first time and there's this really hot interconnection between them and they just want to tear each other's clothes off and they go on to make love or fuck or whatever they go on to do. So that's kind of what we've been brought up to believe is the norm. This you know, seeing somebody and immediately knowing whether we're sexually attracted to them or not. But in demisexuality, without actually getting to know the person, without getting to know the other, the person who is demisexual can find it really difficult to know whether there's a sexual attraction there or not, because it's going to develop over time as they get to know the person, rather than being this sort of like instant, you know, I want to tear your clothes off the first time I saw you kind of feeling. And I think this is really fascinating because I'm really curious about how our dating culture has evolved and why it is that there is this assumption that somebody will want to jump in the sack the first time they meet somebody, you know, sleep together the first night or end up snogging at the end of the night or whatever it might be. And I'm genuinely curious about whether this is a kind of like a more recent phenomenon. I'm thinking of like Tinder and dating apps where you meet the person and maybe there is that kind of expectation that something sexual will happen on first meeting or very soon after. So I'm curious about whether this is something new, this getting off with someone the first time you meet them, whether it's always been there, and whether also, you know, sort of like demisexuality and those feelings of needing to develop an emotional bond with someone have also always been there, like it's always been a thing. And obviously I haven't researched the whole history of human sexuality. I can think about it from my own perspective And I know that there were certainly times when I've met somebody and I have felt an immediate sexual attraction, and I may or may not have ended up acting on that pretty soon after meeting them, with their consent, obviously. I also know that I've been in relationships where I have dated somebody for quite some time before any sexual contact happened. And I kind of think of this as like courtship, which feels to me actually like a more traditional, or in some ways a more romantic way of approaching relationships, that you might court someone or woo them, get to know them, get to know their interests, get to know their personality, get to know them on a deep emotional level before you then decide whether you want to be sexual with them or not. But I think I'm right in saying that the difference for people who identify as demisexual is that they don't know whether they're going to develop sexual feelings or not from the start. So that the physical attraction doesn't really factor. So they kind of have to commit to that getting to know the other person to then see what develops. And I guess the issue for the person who asked me to talk about this topic could be that, like, how do you explain that to other people? How do you explain that your identity, your sexual identity, is demisexual, and therefore what that means is that you just want to get to know them and then see where it goes, and whether or not other people are willing to go on that journey with you. And I think it is really important that we are able to kind of label ourselves with our sexual identities. First of all, because it gives us a language, and it gives us a way of communicating who we are, what's important to us, what we need, what matters. And secondly, because it gives us a sense of not being alone with it. So I have a number of labels that I identify with. I identify as queer. I identify as kinky. I identify as polyamorous. I identify as a woman. But sometimes my gender identity feels more fluid, feels more genderqueer. And sometimes I identify as a dyke. So all of these labels give me the opportunity to kind of seek out others in community and to know that I'm not alone. They give me the opportunity to find resources, make friends who may be feeling the same way or have things in common with me. So I can really understand why being able to understand, I can understand why being able to understand who you are from a labelled or a defined or a definition perspective is really helpful. And I'm really up for opening up these conversations, because if you came to this video not knowing what demisexual meant, then hopefully you know a wee bit more now, but what happens if you meet somebody in a social setting who you're attracted to, and you say, I'm really attracted to you, and they say, well, I'm demisexual. So you're doing them a big favour if you already know what demisexual means, and then you could have a discussion with them about it, rather than having to jump on your phone and Google it, which is also very valid, because obviously we can't be expected to know everything. There's another term, there's another sexual identity called sapiosexual, which is people who are attracted to somebody's intelligence, their perceived intelligence, more so than physical traits and that kind of thing. And there's a whole myriad of ways that we can be attracted to other people. Asexuality, of course, people who maybe want to be in romantic relationships but don't have any interest in sexual relationships whatsoever, or only occasionally. Or, I guess what I'm trying to say in this is that there are so many flavours and varieties of human sexuality, and these can change and evolve throughout our lifetime, and they can also be static throughout our lifetime. But we see so few representations of that variety. And so I'm all for opening up these conversations and opening up these opportunities. So we actually begin to appreciate more about the variety of people who we live alongside. I'm also seeing this as a bit of a personal challenge in my erotic writing. So, as I said at the start, I've kind of fallen into that trope of a lot of my erotica being about two strangers who meet and who can't wait to tear each other's clothes off. And I'm really up for the challenge of setting myself the challenge of writing more variety into my erotica. So more variety of, of age of people, so obviously over the age of consent, but, thinking about sexuality in later life, thinking about sexuality in long-term relationships, thinking about sexuality in people who are single or who don't want to be in a relationship or for another reason can't be or aren't. So, people who may have been bereaved, for example. I just think there's like a whole world to explore out there, and I'm really keen to be part of that exploratory group to go out there and find out more. So I don't know if that's really addressed the topic in the way that the person wanted me to speak about it. I'm really happy to talk some more. So if any of this has piqued your interest and you've got more questions or comments that you want to share about this topic of demisexuality or about other expressions of sexuality and how we experience ourselves, I would love to hear them. I really would. Let's open up this conversation. And you can either leave a comment in the comment section, you can send me a direct message. And let's just keep talking. Let's keep talking and let's keep exploring. So thank you so much for watching. If you are not on my email list, I would really encourage you to jump on. You can find the sign up form at annasansom.com. I'm very aware that sharing things on social media is a little bit limited and restricted. There are censorship rules out there, and people do have accounts taken down for talking about sex and all kinds of things. So I would love us to be able to stay in contact away from social media as well. So if you feel like it, jump on my email list. I send out an email roughly once a fortnight, so you won't be inundated or bombarded. And in the privacy of your email inbox, I get to talk about more things than I feel able to talk about on social media. It's also the place where you can hear about my new writing, courses and workshops and other events that I'm offering. You get discounts if you're on my email list. So come along, please come along and join me there. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you soon with another Ask Anna session. And a big thanks to the person who contributed to the topic. Thank you very much. Bye for now.